Hi, this is Dr. Bob Weathers talking about recovery from addiction, and today I'd like to share with you a brand new website. The website is www.integralrecovery.com. Integral is spelled I-N-T-E-G-R-A-L. Integral recovery stems from the work that's been done over the past couple of decades by philosopher and transpersonal psychologist Ken Wilber. I've maintained a really strong interest in Ken Wilber's work since the days of my dissertation, which was on meditation. He's had a tremendous amount of impact in contemporary psychology, particularly as it integrates spiritual traditions. But he's not limited to just that. He's also very interested in incorporating the best that can be found in cultural anthropology, sociology, contemporary science. It really is a comprehensive thinker. And I want to share with you a little bit, some tidbits from this new site, Integral Recovery, which integrates Wilber's integral theory with the field of addiction and recovery. The focus in Wilber's model is very much a holistic focus, and that means looking at the person from the perspectives of body, mind, and spirit. In a nutshell, what I know by heart from Wilber's integral theory, let me share just a few elements of his theory. It's a very complex and wide-reaching theory. In fact, I'm going to recommend you to go back to the site to find references to his books and summaries of his writings to help elucidate or expand upon what I share here today. Basically, what Wilber suggests is a quadrant model, 4 quadrants, each of which represents a different perspective on who we are as human beings and the world we live in. So let me share just a little bit about each of those 4 quadrants. First is that you can look at our lives from the outside. That is, you can measure me, you can weigh me, you can do chemistry analyses of my blood, etc., and come up with certain kinds of information that's very valuable. This is the domain of empirical science. And it's had a huge impact, of course, in psychology, particularly in this century here in the United States, a big focus on empirical science. Wilber counters that one-sidedness, though, by saying that just as you can look at the individual person, that would be the first quadrant, the individual person from an empirical scientific perspective, you need to complement that with its opposite, which is looking at the individual person from an insider perspective. In psychology and philosophy, this insider perspective is referred to as phenomenology. So a phenomenological perspective, that is looking from the inside at what makes me tick, for example, requires dialogue, requires talking with me. You don't have to talk to me to measure me, but you do have to talk to me to know what it feels like to be inside my skin. Now, just as we can look at the individual from an individual, unique I, me, mine perspective, we can also look at each of us as individuals embedded within social and cultural contexts. Now, the work of sociology specifically is to measure what happens in collectives, what happens in groups, what are the impact of such variables as economics, gender, ethnicity, political contexts. This would be the outsider perspective, doing an empirical study where you can do demographics, for example, come up with statistical analyses that look at me as an individual as I am embedded in a social context, and you can measure that from the outside. You don't really need to talk to me. However, in order to get a full picture, you need to fill that out by looking at the 4th quadrant. If the 3rd perspective, then, the 3rd quadrant, is looking at the individual as he or she exists embedded within a social context, and this can be done from the outside by collecting numbers, measurements of functioning, etc., without dialogue with the individual, then there's a 4th quadrant that needs to be added in order to really fill in a holistic perspective, and this would be looking at the individual as embedded within a cultural context and as looked at from within. Is that you can measure certain variables, demographics, statistics, for example, from the outside, but in order to understand what is going on culturally, spiritually, values, ethics. These variables, they have to be done from a cultural anthropological perspective, that is, an insider perspective. In cultural anthropology, this has been referred to, among other things, as a participant observer perspective. You have to get into the culture, live within it to really understand what makes it tick. So 4 quadrants: outsider, insider, collective versus individual. Each one of these, as it's applied to addiction, is relevant. In fact, needs to be integrated for a completely full-bodied approach to treating addiction and recovery. There's been a lot of talk over the last decades in developing a biopsychosocial approach to working with addictions: biological, psychological, and social or sociological. What Wilber's quadrant model would do would be to emphasize the validity of all 3 of these. The truth is that oftentimes they're not practiced in reality. Is that you'll get a medical perspective, for example, from the perspective of a physician, that focuses almost exclusively on the biological without consulting with the psychological or the sociological dimensions. And psychologists commit the same error, oftentimes, that is, to ignore biological or medical realities, and so on it goes. So it's really critical that all 3, biological, psychological, and social, be given their due. And then add to that then the cultural. So really you come up with a biopsychosocial-cultural perspective that integrates the body, integrates the mind, integrates the society in which one lives, and the culture in which one is embedded. Now, the potential applications to the treatment of addictions these applications have been on my mind for some time now. It's why I'm so thrilled to see that this model is now being published online and soon to be published in the first volume. I'm sure a series of volumes will come out on integral recovery. I refer you to the website to read more about this book coming out on integral recovery. The book will be published in May of 2013. You can be assured that I've gone to the website and put in my pre-order for that book. As for the site itself, there are abundant resources to be found on integralrecovery.com. These are resources for both professionals and laypersons. Audio and video lectures and interviews. There are written essays. There are even meditation exercises, just for starters. I highly recommend the website as well as the model to all interested students of behavioral sciences, and particularly those that are applying themselves to the field of recovery from addiction. Thank you.